fantastic set of speakers. So up first we've got Kat from NatureScot Reserve, and she's going to talk to you about my favourite animal, the seal, and about Newbury Seal Beach and places. So over to Kat.
Hello everybody, some of you will know me, some of you won't. I'm Reid. I'm the reserve manager at Oregon National Nature Reserve. Just going to bring this on. There we go. So if anyone doesn't know where Coombey is, it's about 15 miles north of Aberdeen. That's the reserve highlighted there. It looks like a dragon crash landing. The main sort of wings, if you like, are the coastal heath, and the tail being the intertidal mud flats running up towards Ellen. And that's an aerial photograph of the estuary mouth there. The seals are all at a sort of sandy hook at the end of the reserve there, and you can see Newbury Village on the left-hand side. Seal colony here is quite an interesting story, actually. I'm just going to flip on one more slide here. Because that is a slide showing some of the wildland in the northeast of Scotland. You can see it gets wilder as you go towards the Cairngorms, the river valleys there. But in terms of the coastal area, it's very developed. So Coombey's a little green oasis amongst all that. Probably the bit to the south of that's less green than it was yeah, so you can see, you know, in a local context, we're quite wild and natural area insofar as these things go. So grey seals. There's been a massive increase. We at NatureScot have 10-year management plans. The last one was 2014 to 2024. Seals didn't need mention. We didn't bother mentioning seals because they weren't really worth mentioning. There weren't really that many. There were a few around the estuary mouth, but not really something that sort of impinged on our consciousness or affected the management of the site. That has substantially changed in that 10-year block. Grey seals have very much started using the mouth of the river here as a haul-out. And in 2017, the Marine Scotland, as was now the Marine Directorate, declared the haul-out here was protected from harassment. We think it's the largest grey seal haul-out in Scotland, and the seals are largely coming here post-breeding elsewhere to moult fur. They used to disappear completely in summer. Sometimes they still do, but some years we've had several hundred remaining over the summer. They'll often spread themselves around the beach to the north a bit further. But these guys are mainly coming here when they're bred somewhere like up in Orkney or on the Isle of May. And about 6 to 8 weeks after they've bred, they'll start growing a new coat. They'll spend a lot of time out in the water there. There's a lot of blood at the surface of the skin, and there's a lot of scratching going on. So if you go down to the reserve just now, you'll see an awful lot of seals. Was it 1900, Claire, you counted the other day? And they're all scratching and molting fur just now. So that's a view from one of Claire. And Claire, can you stick your hand up for a sec? Claire's doing PhD research on seals at the moment. She kindly shared some of her images with us. That's an aerial photo of the seals and mouth there. So we've got a large number of seals now coming here. And it's genuine wildlife spectacle, and it's a very accessible wildlife spectacle. You go to Newbury, you saw that last slide, Newbury is very close. Who thinks seals are cute? Hands in the air, please. At least 50%, probably upwards of 50%. And look at that, my face, you must admit that's gorgeous. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Seals are definitely we had this discussion briefly earlier, but cat is handy. They're lovely to see, and people do enjoy coming and seeing them. And it's good for the soul looking at seals. I mean, yeah, come on. You don't just want to go and chill out like that, you know, and enjoy seeing the seals. But of course, because people do want to come and see the seals, there's both an opportunity and a challenge there for us and for other landowners and stakeholders locally. When I speak about seals here, I'm speaking as NatureScot, but I'm not just speaking as NatureScot. There's the Newbury United Community Trust, there's people like Claire who do research, there's Out Seal Watch, and all have been involved in what's happened with management of seals here. And one thing we're seeing now is that seals perhaps developed on the pupping site. The past few years we've had some pups, and I mean, Come on, anybody who didn't put their hand up last time saying that was make your hand up this time. That is gorgeous, but that is literally on the other side of the river from a place you can park and walk in a very short distance. So that's provided us with management challenges, as we were mentioning, this sort of thing. That is not what we want to see. People try to get too close to seals. Part of that is mobile phone technology. I'll walk closer, I'll walk closer. Oh, it's going away now. Well, duh. Of course it's going to be. Just try to shut the mobile phone up the seals. And part of the work, we've been doing a lot of work with I Can Seal Watch, the local community, with Police Scotland, is to educate people. You know, yeah, come and see the seals. Go to Newborough. Go to the south side. There's a river between you and the seals. They'll be completely chilled out about the fact that you're on the south side of the river because there's water between you and them and they feel safe. If you approach on the north side, especially if you drop down out the dunes like that suddenly, you break the horizon. Now, evolutionarily, if you seal something breaking the horizon is bad news. It's a bear, it's an orca fin, you're lunch. So the seals will charge into the water. You can get injuries, especially smaller animals, which thanks to Claire's research, we know they often use the edges of the group, so they're more vulnerable to being, moved through larger animals. They're also, because they've got smaller body mass, more prone to losing energy. They don't need to expend when they are escaping from people. So we've been doing a lot of education on this. We've also spoken to Aberdeenshire Council, who are the local access authority. We've put in some guidance in place that just to avoid that orange area, because that's where the seals fall out. We've also got the terms there, which I'm not going to speak about today, which is a different issue altogether. But explaining why that area is sensibly avoided, because if you go out there, you will actually disturb the seals, and there are often a great many of them. And we've popped up some signage on site to just direct folk through the dunes so they don't walk right past the seals. Certainly, there's some partner organisations mentioned there. And I think I mentioned everybody already. But now to see something that the Newborough and I think of the community across. As I said earlier, seals are a genuine wildlife spectacle in Newborough. When you go down there, and this time of year they're coming towards the peak numbers, and you're within 50 metres of up to 3,000 grey seals, it's quite an experience. With a set of things you you will get very good views of them. You can see all the different patterns in the coat, you can see cute faces, you can hear them. Again, I guess most folk just really know what seals sound like. But you've got the song itself, wow. And there's just this great wall of noise, seal noise coming at you. And it's really a wonderful experience for people. And you see people stop and just smiling, and it's a great thing to do. And we'll often do seal watches down there various times a year, and you just go down with a telescope and a cut out seal and stand there with a badge saying, ask me about seals. And it's just great to see folk looking through the telescope and getting a lot out of what they're seeing and close encounter with a wild animal. I know we've all got our cards that you gave us for wildlife experiences. I think there's probably going to be a lot of close encounters with wild animals on these cards by the time we get handed back. And that is something that the public can't always get to. Now, the Newborough and I Think Community Trust, 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, secured a great big whack of funding from various grantees, Scottish Rural Communities Funds, Coastal Community Fund, private development from house builders ourselves, we partly funded as well. And they have built an all abilities boardwalk, a car park in Newborough, to viewing platform directly opposite where the seals fall out. There's the platform going along, and somebody with a wee kiddie there. You steady see folk, especially with buggies, and you see wheelchairs on it as well. It's literally the only place in the UK you could take somebody in a wheelchair, or have you put your kiddie as a buggy, down to a place where the 3,000 seals are. Also opens up beach areas to people. Again, I remember when we were there when we opened that, the lady who opened that wheelchair user, and she said that was the first, she'd lived in Newborough for 20, 30 years, especially if she'd ever been able to go down the beach because of the boardwalk. So for a facility like that to exist in the northeast for anybody to use is really fantastic. That's the viewing platform at the end, and there is actually money in wildlife tourism. People are coming to Newborough to see the seals. it's labelled in Google Maps if you've got a seal beach. And you know, Google Maps will always get it right, but it's fairly good description of a seal beach. The white dot in the middle is actually up there, so again, you can see from the viewing platform, you will actually see, you know, up to the right time of year too. The community there charge for parking. It's £3 to park. It's a voluntary charge, right? Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure if somebody was shouting at the back. Yeah, it's £3 to park. They've got meters there that are solar. You just have to change the paper every so often. They think an upwards of an 80% compliance rate with the voluntary parking. It makes them over £30,000 a year, which is then fed back into local community projects like James Bay project or the Local Development Fund, for example, and for upkeep of the south and as well. So it's a great example of circular economy and using the beach and the seals as a resource that, you know, people will come and see. So we've spoken a lot about responsible viewing. So, you know, there's people actually totally responsible viewing the seals. And you can see these people are swimming the south side of the river. The seals are pretty close to them and they're not tall. So it's a great place to see seals. It's a wonderful experience for people to have. One of our key audiences is dog walkers. That doesn't just apply to seals, that applies across the whole reserve. Because again, sometimes dogs will get a bit over enthusiastic and try to swim over and see the seals. But with the way the ice and current is, they're more likely to end up in the North Sea, unfortunately. So yeah, it's just, you know, constantly educating people, constantly talking about seals, and constantly encouraging people to come to Newborough, come to the south side of the river, and have a great experience with wildlife. Because let's face it, that's kind of probably why we're all doing the jobs we're in at the moment, because we have those experiences. It's nice to be able to share that with the public, and the facilities we have here are. So I think that's me just about done. And yeah, there's a couple of social media sites there, and I'll take this off and hand back over.
Thank you, Kat. Yeah, I can't stress how much I live in Newborough, and the seal beach is fantastic. If you have not been there, go this weekend. It is amazing, honestly. So next up, we've got Frances from Greyhope Bay. So, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. In my 15 minutes, I'm going to be sharing with you about how we as an organisation cultivate connections between people and place, and hopefully give you some ideas that you might find useful when delivering your own activities. So first, a little about us. So I'm Frances. I manage Greyhope Bay. We're a charity which exists to connect people to each other, to the environment and to place. Our focus is on community building, and we do this through engaging people with the environment, with coastal heritage, with nature. We created the Greyhope Bay Centre and Cafe, which hopefully a few of you have been to. We're over at Torry Battery, which is a historic monument, and we're there because it's a brilliant spot to see the bottlenose dolphins. But as well as bottlenose dolphins, it's also a really good spot to see bird species, with over 200 species having been seen from the site. So, spending time with one another and in nature is good. I think all the speakers so far have spoken about this. It's good for us as individuals. It's known to improve our mental and our physical health. And in fact, the benefits are so widely understood now that the NHS, both nationally and at our local doctor surgeries, are prescribing nature prescriptions. We also know from our own data that we carried out with Robert Gordon University that showed 93% of respondents that said spending time in and around our centre reduced feelings of stress and anxiety, and 97% said that spending time there also increases their happiness. And we had some lovely quotes earlier which were similar to these, but we had people say things like, "The view allows me to mentally step away from whatever is in my mind, body and heart, and it gives me a boost to my mental health being out in nature." It's also good for communities, helping them with cohesion and pride of place. And it's also brilliant, of course,
for the local environment too. So I think everyone in this room agrees that bringing people together outdoors is a good thing. So how do we make that happen? So this is a very simplified idea, but when you think about engaging people, I picture this scale. So on one end, the faraway end, we have the nature nerds. And to me, this is people who will happily lay in a soggy heathland, taking hours to get the perfect photo of a sundew. You might sit quietly for hours, looking for capercaillies. For you guys, you know, 4 hours in a numbum is nothing. And I hear you and I see you. The other night I spent the evening in rock pools with UV torches rather than being tucked up in bed. So you don't need to justify yourselves to me. But at the other end, we have people who who feel like the outdoors aren't really for them. Maybe there's no one in their life who's encouraged them to get outdoors, or maybe they don't think it's something that they would enjoy. We know that connecting people with places is beneficial, and maybe it's even more beneficial for people who aren't engaging with nature. So how do we cultivate connections for people all across that spectrum? As an organisation, what we do is we meet people where they are on that spectrum, and we provide opportunities for them to learn, join in and connect. So, for those who are wanting to nosy from a distance, and I felt like these seagulls looked pretty nosy, we have our social media. So this is a way for us to engage people who have never visited Greyhope Bay and people who might not even know that we exist. My colleague Rosie, who I think a few of you will know, she runs our social media, and with the help of a conservation student, she puts together regular wildlife posts, showcasing what we've spotted on site and easy to digest information. This is a QR code if you want to take a photo and watch it later of a reel that Rosie did about sea anemones, which is very fun, and an example of one of our posts about different gull IDs. She always adds a little bit of fun and joy into them, so we couldn't see the legs in this gull, so she drew them on. But yes, it always goes down a treat on our socials. For those who are wanting to get a little bit more involved, we have opportunities for them to dip their toes in. So, and for this we have our centre, Greyhope Bay Centre. And our centre is often mistaken for just being a cafe, and although it's so much more than that, we actually don't mind this misperception. Because most people like coffee, and most people feel comfortable visiting a cafe. So people come for coffee, and then they stay for the views, they stay for the nature, and just by sitting and looking and taking in what's outdoors, they're starting to connect with the natural environment. But that's not enough for us. We want them to connect that little bit more. So in the centre, we also have nature guides, and we have binoculars for people to use as well. So here's 2 of our guides. We actually have 4, and they're really short guides, super easy to digest. That just got little facts in them and 14 different species. And then this is a picture of our facilities. So it's got expansive views of the coast and also of the city. For those who are curious to engage that little bit more, we've created opportunities for those ready to sort of wade in. We invite them to our many events, and we do lots of different things. So we have weekly talks with guest speakers. We have surveying opportunities, we have beach cleans, we have coastal creative workshops, and much more. I have here some photos of our activities. So in this one here is one of our Greyhope mornings. We were learning about food webs of the North Sea and how interconnected they are. In the middle, we have a photo of one of our volunteers, Kay, at a BioBlitz that we had last year. And at the end, we have one of our coastal discovery sessions, which we run for families, but we also started running for adults as well, because rock pooling definitely releases the inner child. Then we have the dive headfirst opportunities. These are for people who are really seeking opportunities to connect. They want to get stuck in, they want to meet people, and they want to do their bit. And this doesn't have to be naturey people. This can be people who have recently retired and are looking for a purpose. It might be people who've recently lost a loved one and they're looking for community. And we provide opportunities for these people to volunteer and to co-create with us. So, for example, we have our monthly bird surveys, and these are actually run by our volunteers, and they've become a brilliant space for sort of socialising and people to meet one another and get together. And then at the end, we have a photo there of one of our co-creation sessions where members of the community and the public are welcome to come in and inform what we do in our programme. So what we've learned. So we've learned that creating a welcoming environment is everything. So one of our volunteers, Kay, often speaks about how when she first started coming to our events, what she loved was that no one asked her who she was or what her job was. Everyone valued her input from when she came in just as much as anyone else. So I think creating a welcoming environment is super important. And I think to reiterate what Annie said earlier, it's important to think about the social benefits of the activities that you guys are running. So even if you're delivering ghost bashing or litter picking, it's the cups of tea, it's the chats, it's the moments of connection with one another, which are often just as important as the tasks that you are doing. We as a charity think that it's useful to not think of these like people-y connections as a byproduct of your activity, but rather the core reason that people are getting involved and the reason that they want to come back and keep volunteering and keep helping. The second point I would say is that a diverse offering creates a diverse audience. If you can do something to widen the scope of your event, to entice others, that can be really beneficial in engaging new people and more people. So for example, we might run a coastal discovery and there's some people who haven't been on the beach before and they're a bit nervous about it, but you do it at sunset and we're going to watch the sunset while we do coastal discovery. Well, everyone's watched the sunset, so that feels like something they're comfortable with and used to, so it kind of it opens it up a bit more. Humour helps. I think we do this in our social media, but just bring a bit of joy to what you're doing. You know, working in the environment sector can be depressing at times, so let's enjoy ourselves while we can. And the last thing, is asking for help. The things that the impact that we deliver at Greyhope Bay wouldn't be possible without the help of so many organisations and many who are in here today. So I know this has been said already, but please do reach out and support one another, because I think that's the way forward. So yeah, I think that's a wrap from me. I hope you found this helpful. I know many of you are very busy people, but should you ever want to get involved, we can meet you wherever you're at. Yeah, hope to see you all soon.
Thank you, Frances. Again, another amazing spot. Never been, highly recommend. We're so lucky to have all these fantastic places for wildlife where we live. Up, and we've got Ian here from the East Grampian Coastal Partnership talking about the state of the coast.
Excellent talk. You'll be glad to know that I've only got 5 minutes. So this is going to be a quick update from last year's presentation on what we've been up to since then. And actually afterwards I'm going to try and fit in about a couple of minutes of a rant as well, but we'll get on to that later. So if you remember last year, I did a talk to the people who were here about our State of the Coast project. So we did our first State of the Coast report back in 2009, which was a nice sort of phone book type document, if you can remember what phone books were. So it's a big document that unfortunately, as these things always do, became out of date very quickly. So we're now working on a web-based system to try and record what the situation is at the moment. A few little doom and gloom photos, but it's not going to be that way for long. The idea is to create a go-to place where people can go for information on our coast, so social, economic, environmental. It needs to be readable by basically everybody. It needs to be a sort of the first place, so it gives you the basic facts. This is where you can go to find out more information. And it also needs to be very, very easily updatable. So the idea is that as a new piece of data comes up, it can then be added to it, a few minutes later, we can actually have it live. So the idea is there's a calendar through the year when things can be updated as new data becomes available. This was our original one, if anybody's seen that document. It was really good, but as I say, it became out of date very quickly. This is the new website, and there's a divided up into sections. Then each of these is a link to an information sheet where you can go in and find the information on that specific subject. Some interesting ones here. So this is things like we've included on the climate side of things, the percentage of our electricity coming from renewable sources, which I think you'll see from 2010 to now is quite a remarkable change, but we'll come on to that a bit later as well. Because this is the enemy, this is the dreaded Landman clip, which I'm sure if some barbecue you may have had people giving you quotes on climate change, which you think are completely bizarre. Look up Landman, it comes from there. It's about as historically accurate as Luke, I am your father. But people believe this stuff. So we had a workshop in March last year and we asked what we needed to do next, and the discussion was, do we increase the area, scope, detail, what should we do? And the conclusions that came from this are people wanted a bit of a who's who section, so explaining what different organisations does. It can be quite confusing knowing what people are doing. We wanted a legal section, which has been the most challenging bit, so trying to sort of make the laws around the coast reasonably sort of understandable, while again pointing people to where to get more information. Wanted key pressures section, the document to be updated, summary document to be produced that can be actually physical, something people can have in their hand, and to do more publicity on the sites that people would actually use it. So these are some of the pages that are drafts from our summary document, which we're working on now. So far, the tick list is the legal section is nearly done. We've managed to get some more funding. The legal section is nearly done. Summary documents well on the way, but deadlines are very tight. The who's who is going to be up within the next week. Additional to that, we have quite a useful one, which is we've got a full page on funding sources, so breaking down places people can go to look for funding for improving the coastline. The legal section is kind of getting there. We've got a workshop coming up on the 26th of March, not long, but if people can drop me an email address if you're interested in coming along, that would be excellent. And we're going to be doing a series of social media posts. Finished with this last time as well, which is we need your help in terms of reviewing things, letting us know if we've made mistakes. If anybody's happy to look at some of the draft pages from the summary document, because we're going to do something very brave. We're going to hit print, and generally as soon as you hit print, the next thing that happens is somebody's massively offended because you've got an acronym wrong and something's owned by somebody else and you're practically barred from the city from then on. I'm basically being kicked out of Fraser because we said something wrong about the museum there, but anyway. So if anybody can let us know when we've made mistakes, that's great. I promised you a rant, so here we go. Right, has anybody ever done like art run or sponsored walk or something where they've sort of had a challenge? I did one last year. I'm stupid. I did the Darvel Way Ultra, which is a 52-kilometre ultra, and along there there's signs, and some of them are great. There's one of them which is I love this one, but I'm getting quite old. You may have to explain it to some of the younger people. Chuck Norris wouldn't have got this far. We also had, this is the high point, all downhill from here. We had regular markers saying, you're getting there, you're getting there. And at the end, I think it's really sad because I'm 51. You get a nice big medal that's like, oh, good, we've done this. And, you know, people cheer and whoop and sort of, yay, you've done really well. Now, if that was run by an environmental organisation, I have to say I get the feeling at the high point you'd have a message saying, Oh, it's a long way still. I don't know whatever happens. Die one day. And then as you get further down, you'd have a marker saying, don't know how far it is to the end, but you've got loads to go. And then when you get to the very finish of it, you'd find there was basically a bus stop and a car park. And it's like, saved! Wait a minute. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and if I misunderstood this. I understand that last year, and a couple of years before that, as a planet, we hit peak carbon. So the amount of carbon we're producing is now actually starting to go down. That's that high point. That's the point where you can actually say, we're actually having an effect here, guys. We then get that sign coming along, you know, going on saying, you know, and an example there, the electricity we've got in this room. If we did this talk 10 years ago, the majority of our electricity would be coming from fossil fuels. Now, giving a rounding error, the percentage coming from fossil fuels is basically nothing. You know, basically the electricity we're getting. Yeah, it's not the same for the oil and the cars and everything like that. That's a really big deal. I didn't know that. When I discovered it for a talk I was giving, I bought an electric car, quite frankly, because, wait a minute, so all the electricity, we're now generating more than we're using, so we've either got to export it or we've got to use it ourselves. Well, wait a minute, that really is something that's worth me changing my behaviour and spending money to do. That's positive. That's a big sign saying, we've got this far, we're getting there. Come on, guys, keep going. The other one, I bet you've heard this, just in terms of that nice shiny medal at the end. One of the things you'll often hear from people about climate change in particular is, remember when they was telling you there was going to be a hole in the ozone layer and it was all a disaster and oh, well, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that just disappeared. Well, no, we should have that big shiny medal that said, we spotted there was a problem. We all got together and decided to solve it. We solved it. Hey, party! Whereas what happened is we got to the end. We'd solved that one. And basically there was a bus to take you home and a car park. Whereas we should have been shouting, look guys, we can do this. And it's the same for me on the climate change. We're hitting some big milestones. The message we need to be going is, come on guys, this is tough, but keep going. We're getting there. We're clicking off the things that we need to achieve. Rather than a lot of people going, well, we're never going to make this. Well, we are, we're getting there. So sorry, that's just a rant that came up from just the discussion earlier on. So I just had to. I didn't get to ask the question because you've got it then, but I've got the floor now. So. Right, anyway, anybody who can help us with the state of the coast, please be positive. Let people know when we're winning. Anything to do with like pink eradication. I know we're very good at telling people about squirrels that we've got rid of and how reds are coming back in, but keep on shouting. And any help we can get with this would be fantastic. Is that 5 minutes?
And it's really important to highlight how much positivity you can actually achieve. And it is really easy, and I think people default to negative thinking, but actually having that strength and being like the courage to say, yeah, there is hope that something is good is happening. It's really important. So this session is Robert from the Scottish Invasive Species Initiative. I'll give you that.
I've not got a rant as good as that. It is lunch after me, so that's a positive there. So my name is Robert Paylor. I work for the Scottish Invasive Species Initiative, and I'm based on the River Eithel and the River Ugie, northeast Aberdeenshire. So I'm going to give a little bit of a project update, tell you about the work that we've been doing for the last few years. So we're currently going into our 9th year of the project. We've been going since 2018. And our main goal is to control invasive species on a landscape scale, and we're currently doing that across about 1/3 of Scotland. So you see on the dark green part of the map there, that's our project area, basically separated by river catchment. So we work alongside river trusts and fishery boards And the reason we do that is because, you know, watercourses are effective for seed dispersal, and they also act as wildlife corridors. And on top of the control work, we also aim to educate and raise awareness of invasive species and their impacts. And we're also trying to increase landowner engagement and try and get them to take responsibility for invasive species control on their land. So what are our target species? We've currently got one mammal species that we're targeting, which is the American mink. And then some of our plant species are giant hogweed, Himalayan balsam, Japanese knotweed, and American skunk cabbage. So I'm going to talk you through some of these plant species. I'm sure you all recognize this one, giant hogweed. So these are really quite impressive plants. They can go about 5 meters tall, have these huge leaves, and they just absolutely dominate riverbanks once they're present there. And they, you know, cause riverbank erosion, and they restrict access to rivers. So they have these really big flower heads, and each flower head can actually have up to 50,000 seeds in one flower head, and then those seeds can lie dormant in the ground for up to 10 years. So you really don't want to see a flowering giant hogweed. They also have a phototoxic sap, which causes really bad skin burns when it reacts with sunlight, and that area that gets burnt can actually continue to burn for several years after the initial burn. Next, we've got Himalayan balsam. So this is one that I'm trying to do some good work on the River Ithen catchment. So this, again, it grows in these tall, dense patches all along the riverbanks, crowds out our native species, and it's really bad for the riverbanks because it makes them vulnerable to erosion, because they've got roots that are about that shallow. So underneath that, you've just got soil that can easily just get washed away. They also produce really large quantities of nectar, so they are attracting our pollinators away from our native plants. For example, when I'm out doing this work, you can see, you know, hundreds of bumblebees on the Himalayan balsam, which means they're spending time on that and not on the plants that we want them to. So you can see a photo of some volunteers there. So Himalayan balsam's really easy to control. You just go along and you pull it out, or for dense patches, you can go in with a brush cutter or a weed slasher. So it's great for volunteers. And the last part I'm going to talk about is Japanese knotweed. Hope no one's seen that on their home report. So this is another invasive species similar to the other ones that grows in these dense stands, crowds out our native species, and just dominates wherever it's growing. It's got a really extensive rhizome network. It can actually grow, the roots can grow 3 meters below the soil and spread out by 7 meters wide. And it can actually spread via the rhizome. So even if a small fragment of up to about a centimeter can grow into a whole new plant. Again, increases river erosion risk because when it dies in the winter, you've just got these bare riverbanks that are just soil that can easily wash away. And we treat Japanese knotweed via herbicide application from a knapsack sprayer, or you can also inject the stems with a neat herbicide. So we're going to take a look a little bit closer at American mink. So these are a type of semi-aquatic carnivore in the mustelid family, characterized by their dark brown fur, quite a narrow snout, and they've often got this white patch on the chin. So as you probably know, they were introduced to the UK about 100 years ago, where they were farmed for their fur. And then over the coming years, they were escaped from the farms naturally, or they were released by animal activists who thought they were doing a good thing by releasing them into the wild, but they weren't. And then over sort of the next few years, they spread in the wild, they bred, and now they're pretty much across the whole of the UK. So they can cause quite a bit of damage. You know, they're opportunistic carnivores, and they will pretty much eat anything that they can have a go at. So they'll eat juvenile fish, amphibians, poultry, and I'm sure you've all seen that photo on the bottom right there of a mink taking on a young gannet there, which is, it's really quite an impressive photo. So they're devastating to our native species, and we think you know, they're part of the cause why water voles populations have declined so much, because they've declined by 94% in the past 100 years. So what are we doing about American mink? So often the first step is knowing the signs that mink are in the area. So this could be either a visual report from a member of the public through our website, or a digital sighting or a trail cam sighting a river, or it could be when someone's out on a walk and they find tracks or mink scat along a water course, and they report it to us. So often the first step is to put out, this is one of our mink rafts. So it's basically a raft that floats on the water. It's got a tunnel under there, and then within the tunnel you've got a little basket full of clay, and any animals that are going through the tunnel there, they'll leave their tracks on the clay so we can tell what's passed through. So obviously we're looking for mink tracks on those pads, but it's also really useful to find out what other animals are in the area. You know, we get water vole tracks, otter tracks, all sorts of things, and these are checked by volunteers on a sort of weekly, fortnightly basis. The next step would be to set a live capture trap for mink. So we use live capture traps so that any non-target animals can be released with minimal stress. By law, live capture traps have to be checked every 24 hours. However, to the bottom right photo there, that's called a remote unit. Those are really good bits of kit, so we've got them on sort of over 50% of our traps now. And then when the trap triggers, we get an email and a text saying the trap's been triggered. So that removes the need for volunteers to be going out every day and checking these traps. We also try to reduce the capture chance of otters by putting, we call it an otter guard. It's essentially just something that narrows the entrance to the trap. So we don't want to be getting non-target species in it. And then once mink are captured, they'll be humanely dispatched by someone who's trained to dispatch. So let's take a look at our current mink raft network. So I've put together the data here from sort of the northeast catchments. So this is from the River Devon, the Ugi, the Eithne, the Don, and the Dee, all put together. So every dot you see there is somewhere that we've got a mink raft or a trap. So we've currently got 160 mink volunteers across the area. They are monitoring 60 clay pad rafts, 154 live capture traps, and of those 154, 82 of them have got those remote units on. So, you know, we rely very heavily on volunteers, and we really appreciate all the time that they're putting towards the project. So in 2025, we caught 47 mink. So that's all the red dots you can see on the map there. Pretty good here. So taking a step back here and looking at the project as a whole. So in 2025, we had 407 active mink volunteers who were monitoring 520 traps and 173 clay pads. And last year we got 261 mink across the whole project. So then since we started in 2018, our volunteers have dedicated over 168,000 hours of their time to the project. And in total, we've got 1,167 mink, which is quite a few. So as everyone else has been speaking, we need volunteers. So we're always recruiting volunteers who want to come out and be a mink volunteer, take on a mink raft. But on top of that, if you're interested, we also run volunteer days for plant control, doing Himalayan balsam control mainly, so get involved. So yeah, that's my details there. Look forward to any questions you've got.
That concludes the morning session. What we're going to do now is another Q&A. So if I can invite all the speakers up to the front. Again, don't be shy. And yeah, if you've got a question, pop your hand up. We won't have time for everyone's questions, but we'll try and get around to many people as possible. So yes. Yeah, lady there.
Someone's called me a lady for quite a while. Hi everyone, thank you for your talks. They were brilliant and really interesting. My question is for Robert, actually. So obviously I'm completely on board with invasive species management and eradication. It was just a bit more kind of about the nitty-gritty of the management. So you were talking about Himalayan balsam and how it outcrowds other species that should be in that area. It's also diverting pollination. And part of my question, because I live on the River Ifan and we try and remove it where we can, when it's in quite isolated pockets. If you've got a big swathe of Himalayan balsam or a similar plant, you go in and remove it, then part of my question is, it's outcrowded the native plant that should be there. So you remove it and therefore the pollinators actually have lost a resource. And assuming there wouldn't be anything for them to switch to because the Himalayan balsam's there. So is part of what you do just to remove, or is there any scope for reintroducing what should be there? And do you have the capacity for that? Is that something that is on your mind?
So at the moment we don't have the capacity for plants to be able to remove plants. We work on a top-down approach. We find the source, upstream source of the plants from the river, and we just work down as much as we can to remove it. I mean, there's always potential in the future. We do get more additional funding, more staff that we could be going into these sites and maybe remove that. Not at the moment.
Any more questions? Yeah, gentleman in the jacket at the front.
Yes, thank you. My question's for Kat about the Eithne. I was interested to hear the number of seals. Did you say 1,900? That is a huge colony. Can that be sustained? How quick a period of time is that growing at? Because there's got to be a cut-off point when the Eithne and everything can sustain that population.
You're speaking about the Eithne sustaining the population. It's not the Eithne that sustains the population. It's basically the whole of the North Sea and some of the North Atlantic at least. In terms of population of a predator like a seal, pre-availability drives population. So the seals are feeding throughout the whole of the North Sea. We know from seal scat surveys that most of what they're eating is actually sea fish. There's a lot of sand eel in the diet, a lot of cod in the diet. So at the moment, we're not speaking about the Eithne sustaining it. We're speaking about the whole of the North Sea sustaining it. Make it a bit closer. Is that it's flashing. Better?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not the Eithne that's sustaining it. It's full of the North Sea. It's full of the North Atlantic. At the moment, the population is sort of stabilised around at peak of 2,000 animals, but they're all coming from other sites once they've bred, haul out. They're largely not feeding the area. They're largely just hauling out the water and then moving out to fish elsewhere. We know from tracking surveys they'll go as far as Holland or Denmark to fish. We also know ones that were released in the southwest of Ireland have wound up in the northeast of Scotland. So they're using the whole of the North Atlantic and the whole of the North Sea.
Thank you. I've got time for one more question as lunch is ready. Yeah. The lady in the bee jacket. Anybody?
Thanks very much. My question for Greyhope was because you obviously were talking about that linear line of where you can engage with people. Give us some examples of where you've been working with disadvantaged communities, because clearly within the city there's a number of those communities that need to have far more engagement with nature.
Yeah, of course. So we've done a few projects. We actually did one with East Anglia Coastal Partnership last year. That was sort of beach cleaning and sort of mental wellbeing projects, and we did that with various sort of women shelters within the city. We also last year we did quite a few school visits. One of our volunteers, Julia, goes into schools regularly, and the statistics of the numbers of children who have been to the beach in Aberdeen are very low, which is shocking considering we're living on the coast. Yeah, we do find that a lot of the people who approach us to volunteer are people who are already interested in nature and heritage, But as I said, we're trying to create a system where people who aren't necessarily nature people feel they can come in. And I talked about it as a sort of linear passage where people who are not interested can get engaged and start getting involved. But it's also a bit of a ladder. So people come for a coffee, but then they start chatting with a volunteer, and then they start getting more and more involved. So yeah, we've kind of got a few specific projects that we work on, and then our skills programs ways we engage people disadvantaged.